Dear Lord, may the words that were spoken by your resurrected Son guide the thoughts that I'm going to these your people. If there was a news reporter and a newscast back in the first century, it might have gone something like this. On Sunday, April 5th, 33 CE, there has been news circulating around Jerusalem that the body of the rebel rabbi from Galilee, who was crucified 3 days ago, has been removed from the tomb. We don't know where his followers are, but it seems like the city and the temple are returning to normal activity. There's no such thing as news reporting in the first century. The only documents that we have are the Gospels that describe what happened that day, the first day after the Sabbath and Passover in Jerusalem. They tell us of 4 incidents where Jesus appeared, the risen Jesus appeared to his disciples. The first we read last week, where Jesus speaks to Mary at the open tomb in John chapter 20, verses 11 through 18. In a parallel description, Jesus appears to the other Mary, Salome, and Joanna, and perhaps another woman, when they discovered the empty tomb in Matthew 28, verse 1, and in Mark 16, verse 1, and in Luke 24, verse 10. So we have this story of women at the tomb in all 4 Gospels, but in a little bit of a different format. Then Jesus appears to Simon Peter and 2 other disciples on the road to Emmaus in Luke 24, verses 13 through 35. And in this morning's reading from John's Gospel, John explains that Jesus appeared to his followers who were hiding behind locked doors somewhere in Jerusalem. Pretty sure that they were reflecting on the tumultuous events of the weekend, where their leader was tried and crucified on Friday, and then on Sunday, Mary reported that she'd seen the Lord. Peter and John had been to the tomb, and they knew that the body was gone, but they had no idea what had happened at that point. So their fear is understandable. Their leader was gone, and the Jewish and Roman officials may have been looking for them. Life for them was pretty dark at that moment. Their hopes and dreams of the coming kingdom of God were dashed to pieces on the cross at Golgotha. The darkness of fear was replaced by the light of hope when Jesus comes into their midst through the locked door. Peace be with you, it says, and he shows them his wounded hands and his side. He says, peace be with you a second time. And suddenly the people gathered there with him recognize that it is Jesus Christ, risen from the grave, just as he promised. And they rejoiced in the light of his presence. Now, John doesn't tell us why Thomas wasn't with them, but he's not. And he misses that opportunity to witness firsthand to the events of that evening. It takes another week that Jesus appears again to the disciples. And this time, Thomas is with them. Verse 26. He still has doubts, and he wants to touch the wounds in Jesus' hand and in his side before he will be convinced that Jesus is really present there with them. When Jesus tells Thomas to touch it, Thomas refuses, declaring, "My Lord and my God." Thomas has experienced the light of Christ's presence just as the other disciples had a week earlier. It brightens his outlook and changes his life forever. So our message this morning from John's Gospel is, open your eyes. See the light of God's love in the presence of the resurrected Jesus Christ. Our Gospel author is probably the disciple that Jesus loved, and the author of another letter, a couple of letters later in the New Testament. He joined Peter at the beginning of Jesus' earthly ministry, and together they witnessed all of the events of Jesus' life and work among the people that led to his trial, his crucifixion, and gloriously his resurrection. Now he writes, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you would be you and I and all the people that followed in the days after Jesus' resurrection, so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and through believing, you may have life in his name. That's what happens when we live in the presence of God's light. And that's what happened to those disciples that night, a week after the resurrection. So in his first letter, John proclaims God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. John 1 John 1:15b. When we celebrate the sacrament of Holy Communion, we are opening our eyes and our hearts to the light of God's presence with us in the elements, as we share in the juice and the bread. God may be calling any of us to a new mission or action, so that his church here in our area can become a more vibrant part of the community, and we can reflect the light of God's love to others around us, bringing even more light into our darkened world. As disciples of Jesus Christ, we come out of the darkness of fear and into the light of his glorious presence. We're called to spread that light and his love to others in a world that needs both so desperately. Jesus is alive. He's been resurrected. We need to carry that news to the rest of the world with the hope and courage of those same disciples whose lives were immediately changed because they were in the presence of the resurrected Jesus Christ. Let's all be in that presence and join in that proclamation. Jesus is alive, and his light can shine through us.